Chapter 1. The Desperate Bargain. Vithara had been a jewel of the galaxy, a planet of boundless beauty, thriving ecosystems, and advanced technology that had allowed its inhabitants to prosper for eons. The city sprawled across the once vibrant land, their towering spires piercing the sky, their streets bustling with trade, culture, and the hum of life. But time had a way of eroding even the strongest of civilizations, and Vithara was no different. Decades of war, resource depletion, and political strife had hollowed out the once great empire, leaving behind a planet that had become little more than a barren shell of its former self. The green hills and forests that had once covered the surface were reduced to scorched earth and desolate landscapes, the air thick with dust and the scent of decay. The citizens of Vithara, once proud and noble, now scavenged for survival, clinging to a fading dream of a brighter future that was becoming increasingly impossible to reach. Amidst the ruins of a lost world, Urania, a mother, found herself standing at the crossroads of desperation. Her once beautiful home had long since crumbled, and with it, the last remnants of hope. She had been a diplomat, a figure of grace and influence in the grand halls of Vitharan society, a woman who had been able to offer guidance and wisdom. But now, she was just a shadow of that woman, a husk of someone who had once believed that things could be fixed, that the future would be better for her daughter, Sira. Urania had always promised herself that she would protect her, that she would do anything to ensure that Sira had a future, a life of dignity, of promise. But as the years passed and the situation on Vithara worsened, the choices grew fewer and fewer, and Urania was forced to make a decision that shattered her very soul. Sira, her daughter, had been born into a time of unparalleled hardship. Her tiny hands had clutched at Urania's fingers from the moment she had arrived, and Urania had held her close, determined to shield her from the chaos that surrounded them. But as Sira grew, so too did the harsh realities of their world. There were no more celebrations, no more opportunities for education or hope. The planet had become a fractured shadow of its former self, and the population was dwindling rapidly. The elite had long since fled to other worlds, leaving behind those who had no choice but to fight for survival. And among them was Urania, struggling to find any way to provide for her daughter in a society that had long forgotten the meaning of compassion. The markets were barren, the food was scarce, and the medical supplies were non-existent. The disease that had begun to spread through the remaining population had become an insidious force, killing the old, the sick, and the young with a speed and savagery that left no time for grieving. Sira, though young, was healthy, vibrant, a beacon of life in a dying world. But in a society where survival was a luxury and resources were limited, even that vibrant life had become a commodity. One fateful day, as the sun began to set over the ruins of their once grand city, Urania was approached by a figure she never thought she would see again. His name was Kale, a trader, a man of influence in the black market that had sprung up in the wake of Vithara's downfall. He was known to deal in everything: weapons, technology, rare artifacts, and, as Urania learned, even people. Kale had once been a high-ranking official in Vithara's governmental systems, but when the fall began, he had shifted to more questionable endeavors. Now, his empire was built on the exploitation of Vithara's citizens, buying, selling, trading them like livestock. His eyes were cold, calculating, but there was something behind them, a hunger that Urania couldn't quite place. She had heard rumors of Kale's dealings, of the things he had done to maintain his power in these dark times. And now, standing before her, he was offering her the one thing she had feared most, the chance to trade her daughter's future for a price. Urania. Kale's voice was smooth, like silk, but there was no warmth in it. You've heard the rumors. You know how things are here. You know how much longer this world can hold on. But there's another way, a better way. I can offer you a solution and opportunity for your daughter that would secure her future, that would give her something more than the life she will have here. Urania's heart pounded in her chest as she listened to him, but her mind was already racing with thoughts of survival, of how much longer she could protect Sira from the depths of despair. She knew that Kale's offer was not one made out of kindness. He was a businessman, a man who saw profit in the suffering of others. The thought that he might take her daughter for something so grotesque felt like a knife in her chest. But Urania had no choice but to listen. She had no other options. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice hoarse with the weight of her desperation. Kale smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent a chill down Urania's spine. "Your daughter. She's young, healthy, and has the potential to be more than what this planet can offer her. I can take her to a place where she will be valued, where she will have everything she could ever want, in exchange for a small favor." Urania's breath hitched as she pieced together his meaning. The favor he spoke of was not one she could refuse. She had heard the whispers in the markets, the rumors of the trading of young women among the wealthy, among the off-worlders. It was a deal made in the shadows, where morals had long since died. But Kale was not offering her a choice, he was offering her survival. He was offering her daughter's life in exchange for her soul. "I will give her everything," Kale continued, his voice lower now, more insistent. "I can take her to a place where humans who need to reproduce will pay for someone like her. She'll be taken care of, treated like a queen. She'll be free from the suffering of this world. All she has to do is give them what they want, and she'll have everything." Urania's mind raced as she processed what Kale was asking. His words filled her with nausea, but in her heart, she knew there was nothing left to lose. The world she had once known was gone, replaced by this grim, desolate existence where her daughter's future had been sold before she could even grasp it. She could feel her body trembling as Kale's words sunk in. She had no choice. With tears filling her eyes, Urania spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Take her, and do whatever you must. Just promise me she'll be safe." Kale nodded, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You have my word, Urania. She'll have a better life than any of us could have here. A life free from suffering. A life of privilege." And with that, Urania made the most devastating decision of her life. She had sold her daughter's future, traded her for the promise of a life outside the death and decay of Vithara. But in that moment, as Kale left with Sira in tow, Urania knew the cost of that decision was far greater than anything she could have imagined. The sound of Kale's footsteps echoed in Urania's mind long after he had disappeared with her daughter, Sira. Each step he took away from her, from the small, helpless girl who had been the center of Urania's world, felt like the death of something precious. Her heart twisted with grief, and the hollow pit of regret began to consume her. She had watched her daughter leave, taken from her by the cold, calculating man who had promised a better life. Better life. Urania had clung to that fragile hope, but now, standing alone in the ruins of what was once a proud and thriving world, that hope seemed as empty as the desolate streets that stretched before her. The wind howled across the wastelands of Vithara, carrying with it the taste of dust and decay. Once, the planet had been known for its lush green landscapes and vibrant cities, but all that remained now were the broken fragments of a civilization that had torn itself apart. Urania stood in the center of what had once been the capital, now little more than a collection of crumbling buildings and abandoned homes, all reminders of a time when the Zyphar people had ruled over the stars with pride. But that was before the fall. The fall of the Zyphar had been slow at first, a gradual erosion of the society they had built. The wars, the hunger for more power, the endless cycles of betrayal. And when it all came crashing down, it came with a force that destroyed everything, every dream, every hope, and every life. The Zyphar had built empires only to watch them crumble. And now, all that remained of the once proud species were the survivors who had been abandoned in the ashes. And Urania, a mother who had sacrificed the one thing that had ever given her life meaning, was among them. She hadn't even had the courage to tell Sira the truth, to explain that this bargain wasn't just for their survival, but for the hope that, somehow, her daughter would have a future. She had watched Kale take Sira away with an air of finality, the smug expression on his face never once faltering as he disappeared into the distant horizon. And Urania had been left alone, the cold emptiness in her chest growing with each passing second. She wandered aimlessly through the desolate streets, each step more futile than the last. The world felt like it was closing in on her, the weight of the decision she had made crushing her from all sides. But she could not turn back. There was no undoing the choice she had made. She had traded her daughter's freedom for survival, for the hope that someone would save her. And now, that hope felt as distant as the stars themselves. The silence around her was deafening, a reminder of everything she had lost. The planet had once been filled with the laughter of children, the hum of trade, the vibrancy of life. But now it was just an echo, a ghost of what it had once been. Urania had watched her people fall, and now, she was watching the last bit of her humanity slip away as well. Chapter 2. The Regret. Days turned into weeks, and Urania found herself lost in the monotony of survival. The ruins of her world offered no solace, no comfort, and each passing moment felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. She had always prided herself on her strength, on her ability to navigate the political world of the Zyphar, to rise through the ranks despite the odds. But now, that strength felt hollow. She had been a mother first, and that role had defined her existence. She had watched Sira grow, from a small child with big, curious eyes to a young woman who could see beyond the horizon of their broken world. Sira had been her reason for hope, the only reason Urania had continued to fight, to survive, to believe that somehow things could be better. But now, her daughter was gone, taken by a man who would use her in ways that Urania couldn't bear to think about. The thought gnawed at her, a constant presence in the back of her mind. Had she made the right choice? Was there any future for Sira at all, or had she condemned her to a life of misery, of servitude, of being nothing more than an object for some distant race to reproduce with? The very thought made Urania's stomach turn. She had made a deal with Kale, thinking it would save them both, but now, it felt like she had sold her soul. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Urania found herself standing at the edge of the cliff that overlooked the ruins of the capital. The wind blew through her hair, and the air was thick with dust and the weight of all the things left unsaid. She stared out into the distance, her mind reeling. What had happened to the Zyphar? What had happened to their empire? What had happened to their legacy? And most importantly, what had happened to Sira? The horizon seemed to stretch forever before her, the fading light casting an orange glow over the broken landscape. She could almost see her daughter's face, her bright eyes full of innocence and curiosity, staring out into that same horizon, longing for something more. She had been the last hope for their species, and now she was gone, taken from her by the very system that had once been her family. Urania's heart ached as she realized the truth. She had failed her daughter. She had failed the Zyphar. She had failed everything she had ever believed in. She had traded the last piece of her soul, her hope, for survival. And now, all that remained was the gnawing emptiness that would never leave her. But as she stood there, the wind whipping around her, something else stirred in her chest. It wasn't just regret anymore. It was rage. She had been forced into this situation, her back pressed against the wall by the unrelenting tide of desperation that had consumed her people. She had made the choice, yes, but she had done it because there had been no other option. She had been forced to choose between saving her daughter and watching her die in front of her. And now, she would not allow that choice to define her. "I will find you, Sira," Urania whispered into the wind, her voice trembling with emotion. "I will bring you back. I will make this right." The wind carried her words away, but in her heart, a new determination had been kindled. She had sacrificed everything, but she would not let her daughter's future be determined by the whims of those who saw her as nothing more than a commodity. She would find a way to save Sira, no matter what it took. She would track down Kale and take her daughter back. She would make sure that Sira was not lost to the greed of the universe. For the first time in weeks, Urania felt something stir inside her. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was revenge, and it was a promise. Days had passed since Urania stood on the cliffside, vowing to find her daughter. The promise burned in her chest like an unquenchable fire, pushing her to act, to make something of the broken, empty life she had left. The desolation of Vithara, once a place of grandeur and pride, now served only as a reminder of what had been lost, both to her people and to herself. There were no comforts, no luxuries left. The survival of the Zyphar lay in the hands of those who were willing to fight, and Urania had made her decision. She couldn't simply let Sira fade into the hands of Kale, into a future of reproduction for those who saw her daughter as nothing more than a vessel. No, Urania would not allow it. She had already lost too much: her people, her civilization, her dignity, and she could not lose her daughter as well. Even if it meant defying Kale, even if it meant tearing apart the fragile remnants of Vithara's last hope, She would find a way to take Syrah back. But the world around her was not kind to those who dared challenge the status quo. Vithara was no longer a world of diplomacy, of pride and tradition. The collapse of the Zyphar had left it in ruins, and Kale had risen from the ashes as one of the few who had found a way to thrive. His power was built on the backs of those he could control, human and alien alike. Urania was no match for him, but she had something he didn't: determination, desperation, and the willingness to do whatever it took to reclaim her daughter. She had heard whispers in the streets of a resistance group, small pockets of survivors who were still trying to hold onto what remained of the Zyphar's legacy. They were fighting to restore some semblance of order to the planet, to rebuild what had been lost, though their efforts seemed futile in the face of the overwhelming chaos. Still, Urania saw an opportunity. If anyone could help her find Kale, it would be them. One evening, under the cover of darkness, she slipped through the streets of the capital, moving silently between the crumbling buildings and the dilapidated alleyways. Her destination was a small, hidden enclave in the heart of the city where the resistance met. She had no guarantee that they would help her, but she was out of options. Syrah's face burned in her mind. She could still see the look of confusion and fear in her daughter's eyes when Kale had taken her. That image drove her forward, spurring her to take this risk. The door to the resistance hideout creaked open as Urania approached, and she stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The room was filled with rough-hewn furniture and holographic displays showing data on the state of Vithara's survivors. There were a few individuals scattered throughout the room, each one working quietly on various tasks. At the center, a tall figure stood: Commander Ivar, a hardened veteran of the Zyphar's last defense against the enemy forces. His face was scarred, his eyes cold, but there was a fire in them that Urania hadn't seen in the eyes of others for a long time. She approached him cautiously, the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. "You're here for a reason." Ivar's gravelly voice cut through the silence before Urania had a chance to speak. He had been watching her from across the room, and though his posture was relaxed, there was no mistaking the sharpness of his gaze. Urania took a deep breath and steadied herself. "I need your help. I'm looking for Kale. He's taken my daughter Syrah. I've made a deal with him, but I want her back. I can't let him use her for what he wants." Ivar studied her for a moment, the fire in his eyes flickering with something unreadable. Kale is no simple traitor. He's a man who has built his empire on the suffering of others. He controls the few remaining resources left on this planet, and he knows how to play the game. "What you ask is no small thing." "I don't care," Urania responded, her voice firm despite the knot of fear that twisted in her stomach. "I've already lost too much. I can't lose my daughter too." Ivar nodded, as if he had expected nothing less. "All right, I'll help you, but you need to understand the consequences. Kale doesn't let anyone take from him without retribution. If you want your daughter back, you'll have to be prepared to fight, and you won't be doing it alone." Urania swallowed hard. "I'm ready. I'll do whatever it takes." Chapter 3: The Rebellion. The next few days were a blur of planning, preparation, and deep uncertainty. Urania joined the resistance in their underground meetings, listening to Ivar and the others as they devised a plan to infiltrate Kale's stronghold. The task was monumental. Kale's fortress was well guarded, and his influence over the planet was vast. He had resources at his disposal that the resistance could only dream of, and even a small assault on his operations would draw the attention of the remaining factions loyal to him. But Urania had no choice. She had already crossed a line. There was no going back now. Under Ivar's leadership, the resistance had gathered a small, capable group of soldiers. They were a diverse mix of species, some Zyphar, some of other races that had been stranded on Vithara after the fall of the Empire, but all shared the same purpose: to reclaim their world, to take back what Kale had stolen. They had grown tired of living in the shadows, of scrapping for scraps in a world that had been abandoned by its leaders. Urania's place in the group was clear, though she felt the weight of her decision every step of the way. She wasn't a fighter. She had been a diplomat, a negotiator, someone who could smooth over the tension of a room with words. But now, she had no words left. She had nothing but the desire to get her daughter back, to stop Kale. As the planning continued, Urania's thoughts often turned to Syrah. Where was she now? Was she still in Kale's grasp? What had become of her? The uncertainty gnawed at her, a constant ache in her chest that grew with each passing hour. She couldn't stop the thought that perhaps, even if she succeeded in rescuing her, her daughter would never be the same. Kale's influence was pervasive, and no one who entered his orbit ever truly escaped unchanged. But even that was better than living in this purgatory, this hopeless existence where survival meant sacrificing everything. Sira deserved more. She deserved freedom. She deserved a future that was hers and hers alone. The night before their mission, the team gathered at the Resistance hideout, preparing for the assault on Kale's compound. The tension in the air was palpable, each person silently preparing for the fight ahead. The weight of the moment settled over Urania like a heavy cloak, but she pushed it aside. She had come this far. There was no turning back now. Ivar stood before the group, his expression resolute. Tomorrow we strike. We hit them hard, we hit them fast. Kale won't expect us. We have to move quickly before he can rally his forces. Urania stepped forward, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I'm with you. I'll do whatever it takes to bring Sira back. Ivar nodded. We all have our reasons for this fight. Tomorrow, we take back what's ours. As they prepared to leave, Urania's heart raced. Tomorrow would decide everything, whether she would be able to reclaim the daughter she had lost, whether she would survive the fight, and whether she could finally undo the terrible bargain she had made with Kale. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. The night was thick with tension as Urania and the Resistance moved silently through the ruins of Ithara. The small group was a mix of seasoned fighters and civilians, those who had lost everything and those who had nothing left to lose. Their mission was clear: infiltrate Kale's heavily fortified stronghold, locate Sira, and bring her back. But the odds were stacked against them. Kale had eyes everywhere. His influence stretched across the galaxy, and the resources at his disposal were nearly limitless. It was a battle they couldn't afford to lose, but even so, Urania felt the weight of what they were attempting. The plan was simple. In theory, slip past Kale's defenses undetected, get inside, locate the girl, and get out as quickly as possible. But Urania knew better than anyone that simple plans often led to the worst kind of disaster. The only thing that kept her moving forward was the thought of her daughter, her sweet Sira, the girl who had once held her hand with so much trust. As they approached the outskirts of Kale's compound, Urania's heart pounded in her chest. She could see the fortress looming ahead, its imposing structure silhouetted against the dark sky. It was a marvel of engineering, a sprawling fortress made of blackened steel and reinforced alloys, with high walls and automated sentries patrolling the perimeter. Kale had turned his stronghold into a near-impenetrable fortress, and Urania was painfully aware that one wrong move could spell disaster for them all. The team gathered in the shadows, their breathing steady as they prepared to breach the compound's defenses. Ivar, ever the strategist, had already mapped out the weak points in Kale's perimeter, but even with that knowledge, there was no guarantee they would make it inside undetected. The clock was ticking. Urania stayed close to Ivar as he issued the final orders. Stay sharp. We get in, we find Sira, and we leave. No heroics. This isn't a fight, we're here for, it's a rescue operation. Understood. The team nodded, each person moving to their assigned position. Urania felt the chill of the night air against her skin, but her body was numb with a combination of fear and adrenaline. There was no turning back now. The moment they moved forward, there would be no second chances. The first phase of the operation went smoothly. The group used the cover of darkness to their advantage, slipping through the shadows, avoiding the automated sentries, and breaching the compound's outer walls without alerting anyone. Urania's heart was in her throat as they advanced deeper into the stronghold. Every sound seemed to echo in the silence of the night, the crackling of their footfalls against the dirt, the faintest hum of Kale's high-tech security systems. It was a tense, suffocating atmosphere, but they kept moving, closer to their objective. They reached the main building, a massive structure at the heart of the compound. Inside, there were guards armed, alert, and clearly expecting something. But they hadn't anticipated the Resistance's stealth. Urania and the others moved quickly, silently neutralizing guards as they went. Every movement was calculated, every decision made with precision. The mission had become an extension of their will to survive, their desire to reclaim what had been stolen from them. When they reached the inner sanctum of Kale's stronghold, Urania felt her chest tighten. The doors ahead were massive, guarded by an intricate security system that could easily alert Kale's forces. But they had anticipated this. Mara, the tech specialist, quickly set to work disabling the locks and overriding the security codes. Urania stood back, her nerves on edge, but her resolve firm. Finally, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Urania's eyes immediately fell on the figure standing inside the girl she had once called her daughter. Sira was standing by a large, reinforced glass panel, her back to them. She was wearing a plain, white garment that contrasted sharply with the dark surroundings. Her long, silver hair hung loosely around her shoulders, but there was no mistaking the look on her face. The light in her eyes, once full of life and curiosity, was now empty. She stood, unmoving, her posture stiff and unyielding. "Sira," Urania gasped, stepping forward. But as she did, Kale's voice echoed from behind her. "Ah, Urania." Kale's voice was smooth, taunting. "I knew you would come. You can't resist a mother's love, can you?" Urania froze, her breath catching in her throat. Kale emerged from the shadows, stepping into view with a wicked smile on his face. He was dressed in fine, tailored clothes, the picture of opulence amidst the stark, sterile surroundings. His eyes gleamed with a mix of pride and amusement, as though he had already won. "You thought you could just walk in here, take what's mine, and leave without consequences?" Kale asked, his tone mocking. "You really don't understand how this works, do you?" Urania turned to face him, her anger rising, but she had no time to waste. She had to act quickly before things got worse. "Sira," Urania shouted, stepping closer. "Come to me. You don't belong here." Sira turned, her eyes locking onto Urania's. For a moment, Urania saw something flicker behind her daughter's eyes, something that reminded her of the girl she had known, the girl she had raised. But it was fleeting, quickly replaced by the cold, distant gaze of someone who had been broken by the world. "I can't, Mother." Sira's voice was flat, empty, as though she were speaking from a distance. "I'm not the same anymore. You sold me. You gave me away." Urania's heart shattered. The pain of her daughter's words cut deeper than any blade could, but she didn't have time to mourn. Kale was moving toward them, his hands raised in mock surrender. "It's too late, Urania," Kale said, his grin widening. "Your daughter is mine now. She's been made into something new. You sold her future, and now, she's part of something far greater than your pathetic resistance could ever be." Urania's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to think fast. Kale's smugness, his confidence in his control over Sira, was infuriating. But Urania had always been a fighter, and she wasn't about to lose her daughter, not after everything she had done to save her. Without warning, Urania lunged forward, grabbing the control panel at the side of the room. The room went dark for a moment, then flickered back to life as the emergency systems came online. The glass panel in front of Sira shattered, and Urania rushed to her side, pulling her into her arms. "Come on, Sira," Urania shouted, her voice desperate. "You're coming with me." But as she tried to pull Sira toward the door, Kale's laugh echoed in the room. "You think it's that easy? You really think you can just walk away?" Suddenly, the room was filled with armed guards, their weapons raised, surrounding Urania and her daughter. Urania's breath hitched, but she didn't stop. She pushed forward, forcing Sira to follow. "Help me," Urania screamed, looking to Ivar and the resistance soldiers. But it was too late. The guards closed in, their blasters raised. Urania fought, pushing through the chaos, but it felt like a futile struggle. In a moment of clarity, Urania realized what she had to do. She couldn't fight this battle like a diplomat. She couldn't bargain or plead her way out. The stakes were too high. "Let go of her," Urania screamed, shoving Sira toward the resistance fighters. "Run!" As Sira hesitated, looking back at her mother, Urania knew the truth. This was their final stand. This was her last chance to free her daughter from the life she had been forced into. The last thing Urania saw was Kale's smug face as she and Sira were pulled into the chaos of battle. And then, everything went black. Chapter 4, The Final Choice. Urania awoke to silence. The chaos of the battle had subsided. She felt a dull pain in her head, her body aching from the struggle. Her arms were sore from the fight. But there was something else, something more profound that tugged at her chest. She had failed. The world was slipping away, her daughter still trapped in the web of Kale's control. But as Urania opened her eyes, she saw something that gave her hope. Sira stood before her. "Mom," Sira whispered, her voice soft, but there was something different about it. Her eyes, once hollow, now seemed to carry something more regret, perhaps, but also a sense of agency. "I'm sorry," Sira said, her voice trembling. "I was afraid. I thought you abandoned me. But I didn't want to be a slave anymore. Not to him. Not to anyone." Urania reached out, pulling her daughter close, her heart swelling with relief. "You don't have to be. We'll fight. Together." And for the first time in a long while, Urania knew that the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun.